Now I know I expected to be done talking about Wish after making a complete review of the movie, but the film just has so much missed potential to continue talking about. Or of course, at this time, most of us has actually talked about the characters of Magnifico and Asha being poorly developed while the rest weren't even really characters at all and more of talking heads to support it. The biggest which, to mention, is Queen Amaya, the king's wife and consort who takes over at the end of the film. A character who originally was a villain alongside Magnifico but was removed to better fit the final project of the story they wanted in the mess that they made. Where, when I thought about talking about wasted villains like the Duke of Weselton from Frozen, I realized that she also really fit the billing because of those deleted scenes and as a character from the film. One where I want to discuss her major faults that miss so much potential compared to any other in the film, including Asha's friends and family who barely serve their purposes either. But still, at the very least, and I mean at the very least in this part, they did serve their intended purposes in the story with who they were as those characters compared to her own. Where she was actually never given something meaningful to exist at all within this story the more you watch it as well. Well, also because the other characters like the Seven Dorks and our family are just too much to talk about on their own, and I spent enough time already talking about that in the full review of what they could do, where it seems better to complete this unholy trinity because they're the main characters if you include the past info, starting with Asha Magnifico and now Amaya. So to start off, we have to review her character as it is finally presented, what we already know and how we should move forward. At the very beginning of the story, we see she met Magnifico at some point in time. She fell in love with him and they both founded the Kingdom of Roses, sharing the same idea that people deserve to have a chance at their wish, wishing to serve those very subjects. Where her personality is that of a kind and caring mother who believes in those like Asha who represent the essence of what Roses is meant to be, staying loyal by her husband's side because of his tragic backstory that led them to prevent to happen to anyone else, to have people grant the desires that they truly wish for, which of course we know was shafted for pure evil stupidity in the second half because this was an anniversary film. And the next scene she's in generally pushes her to the side of our hero because of her caring attitude, not knowing this evil quite yet but still standing steady with the belief that she held since the founding of this very city. At least that's what I can pull out of my ass since there's hardly enough scenes to really talk about her in this part and in the middle in this conflicting relationship between Asha and Magnifico. The story wants to focus on that rather than any other element, even though that is also very important to the story. Like her next great importance in this movie is to stop him from using the book that has evil magic for desperate measures that really isn't explained well enough beyond that point as a plot device for his evil ways, the green magic that, basically says, I'm the bad guy. Sure, you might get what they were going for, using her character as a mediator between the two main characters that slowly get to see the descent of Magnifico's turn to evil and understand what he really caused to everyone, but it's just not enough. Like, great, she can help pull him back to the light, but what good does that really do when he still turns to the dark side anyway? What really is the point of having her as that type of character if she has lived with this man and understood him longer than any of us know? Because for the most part in the film, she just stands in the background and just helplessly watches him get more frustrated about his situation and gets worried about his health until her next major scene. One where we see him actually use the book and turn her to fear, the event that tries to turn people against him as that very villain. This, like I just said earlier, morphs her role into doing the right thing, being the voice of the audience that sees this man's quick descent and trying to stop it once and for all, with the rat whispering to her about Asha's plan to stand up to what Amaya believes in and join into the fight and the song Knowing What I Know Now. The one scene that I hated the most in the entire film because of how shallow it seemed for her to do. I mean, you knew it was going to happen since they just talked about that in that scene, but it just felt so off that she had to do this at all. The closest person to the king actually singing and rebelling against him. Discussing traits like he loves his crown more than himself and all the good melted in him, which does not make sense due to the fact that we saw their love a bit earlier. That she is now a collectible item that Asha gets at McDonald's alongside the rest of her friends to commit to the play they have in action and nothing else. Vessels to just be used for the plot and nothing more. It's just absolutely useless other than the fact that she's the queen who has access to the tower for them, that she's the ticket inside, and that's it. because I really do not count this wish's reprise in factoring for her usefulness, because everyone else also sings that to defeat the villain, which is just plainly stupid. That everyone here becomes one of the same, imprisoned with his green magic to be useless so that Asha can face him alone and start their battle to start the singing process, and adds nothing of greater value to validate their own individual existence. Or maybe in the movie's view, just enough to make her the ruler of Rosas who gets to imprison her ex-husband, where the good ruler of Rosas is now in control finally, and that just makes things great, which we know doesn't. Basically, in the final product, there isn't really much to talk about her with what is presented, a case that sucks because she was, in fact, a big focus, being literally by his side from the very get-go, where no matter how hard you try to compare it to other characters you might say fulfill similar roles, it just really doesn't work. Because the only thing I really can compare to that is just any other Disney king and queen who are literally the minor characters of their films. The ones that are sometimes either killed off if they are the parents or separated from the plot for the most part and are good from beginning to end. No villain whatsoever. Like when you understand that type of pairing that Disney is so used to, you know, in royal families and such, then you should expect them to go together throughout the thick and thin. Something I mentioned previously as a strong suit of Disney couples, and how the original version of them would have been the twist that actually worked. This is the section where we now can discuss her as a villain that was wasted after being a wasted character, where, as confirmed by the bonus features, Amaya was in fact a villain alongside Magnifico, but also had an evil cat as a bonus reference to traditional Disney villains, that they both worked together from the very beginning to enrich themselves rather than the people that they're supposed to serve. And in this one scene, she still has traits of her final self that's logical enough to pull Magnifico back out of the most dangerous situations, such as eating the wishes, a situation that is far better than what the green magic he finally displays, and more methodical in her approach to villainy, that her character had her own strengths and weaknesses that were used to justify her existence in the film, instead of, you know, what they virtually sprinkled finally, but changed again because they didn't want you to know he was a villain right away, like most other Disney villains did in the past, except the modern era where they wanted to follow the formula of the twist villain that didn't really work, explaining that it's better to have Asha understand what he actually does, since they loved living in the kingdom from the very beginning, that gives them the ability to have their wishes granted as a parallel to what the Disney company is supposed to do in the realm of entertainment, and virtually using Amaya as that representative of those people. And hence why her wish is to help those people of Rosas that fits this story much better, or makes it worse in my opinion. Because in this version, you actually understand her purpose much better in adding an element that is somewhat familiar to Disney, but also very different in a villainous couple. An interesting fresh take to bring those stories that allows them to grow on their own. Every deleted scene shows something that could have matched this version and added much more for every single character, as I'll mention a bit before, including the last Amaya deleted scene. This other deleted scene is the one where Star was actually the talking star, where he morphed into different forms while Maya was trying to stop them with the guards to actually get him. Again, this scene has more for them to do as the guard characters rather than appearing several times in the film never to be used again after they chase Asha during their one appearance, and how Amaya is using her deductive skills to get after her, serving her purpose well enough while Magnifico prepares for the greater evil back in the Kingdom of Rosas or whatever they were going for. Where this story had more of the traditional evil recipe that made much more sense to do so with those themes, the motivations, and the tone of the style that it was going for, rather than what was obviously rushed and changed to the mediocre mess that we got. Where Amaya here was supposed to be more, and how you can really feel that even when she's not a villain, being again close to the king. Where if you are that close, then you know you would be more willing to be on their side rather than a random teenager who lives in the kingdom with such radical viewpoints that most don't even know about yet, and blinded by their own personal loyalty on the surface, like Dahlia in this part. In another deleted scene, yes I know I mentioned like almost all of them at this point, is where the good role that Amaya had was still delegated to Asha's friends, having another one in the story that made them 8 instead of 7, where characters like him and Dahlia did realize the mistake of evil that Magnifico had that brought and validated Asha's viewpoint, one that fit an earlier version of the story where they wanted to represent some people with disabilities, which Dahlia had with the crutch, and how our hero uses that as a strength rather than a weakness and a liability that the king had in his mind, ones where he don't grant wishes to the people who aren't able to achieve what we normally have. Stuff that, once again, sounds better than the actual story that fits what they were going for, instead of the opposite that they somehow said fit better. Like, listen, we all know stories go through rewrites all the time, but why did you think shafting characters like this was good at all? Why can't you just stick to an idea that sounds good and fresh? I mean, I can't believe how much I care about all of this so deeply, but I just want stuff like this to succeed. I want it to be better, but that's not always the case anymore. And how it is one of the most interesting characters that Disney could have developed with both what was originally shown in the first trailers and as a villain, even if she is modeled similar to many female villains of the past like the Evil Queen, but stitched together with something else, but then ended up to be a waste of space. I just want a reason to care about this person, whether it be good or bad, and if I don't get either, I do consider this movie to be a failure, where there is just nothing for me, and I mean nothing, to be happy about with what her position is at the end, because it really didn't feel like she earned that either. Hardly involved other than having this changed perspective through Asha slowly and then ending up as the new ruler who fulfills what was promised by her ex-husband now. I mean, in that regard, you kinda can think of her as a villain still who willfully delights in the defeat of her husband alongside everyone else, but it just still feels hollow anyways to continue. And thinking about it more and more, there's just too many good characters in this film. There are too many people who are beholden to one side while Magnifico gets it all by himself to be the evil, and I really hate it. Like, having more people involved like that with Amaya, the cat, and the guards to be those villains would be better to balance this story out like Disney has done from before, even if the intention was to reveal all who wish were relatively good and only one to twist for their own gain. I just don't understand the logic and reason why it had to be this certain way. But overall, since I've talked longer than I needed to about this character, Wish is just one of those films that have too much underdevelopment to even take it seriously. Boring and dry of any life that these stories usually have for the respect of 100 years. If they had simply followed what they produced in those deleted scenes, this could have been a home run of an idea, but then they still decided to go with the lowest common denominator that relegated those like Queen Amaya into the dust that they were formed by into the Disney archives. And sadly, instead of being looked back upon like many other Disney villains of the past that we still know today, she will just be another character who is there in the film for the sake of being there and nobody else would ever care. And I'm all done, so goodbye.